Thursday World Economic News, starting over in China, and a Bloomberg article called China Hides Rampant Inflation in Money Binge by Patrick Chovanec. And it's a good article, quite long for Bloomberg. I pulled this out of the middle of it. In 2009, those banks in China made almost 10 trillion yuan in new loans, more than double any previous year. This is 2009, expanding the country's loan portfolio by 1/3. This year they will probably lend 8 trillion yuan, almost twice as much as in 2008. Cascade of loans. Where did all that money come from? It came from Chinese banks being allowed to draw down on their reserves, which opened up a cascade of new lendable funds throughout the entire system. China's lending boom was, in effect, a massive monetary stimulus, or quantitative easing. This is going to be a tricky world news thing. The question is, will this lead to inflation in China? The answer is probably yes. But why? I defy anybody to say exactly. Pragmatic capitalism. The New York Fed explains how the government spends first and issues bonds later. Now this is MMT, modern monetary theory type thing. Now I'll state again. We've got, let's say, the real economy on this side that we can go some way towards explaining, and we know how to explain it to some extent in relation to our household budget, that if we run out of money, we run bankrupt. We understand that. On this side is the way governments work in a full fiat money system. It's this side that still runs with the effects of a gold standard. We run as though we're on a gold standard in the real world. Modern governments in a full fiat world do not run as of a gold standard. And I have found the MMTers are the only people that I know of, and their ilk, that go any way to explaining how money works in a non-gold standard world. It's a very good article to read, and I think there are 93 comments at the time that I'm putting this up, so there's probably over 100 now, and I will have read all of them by the time that you're reading them. And I'm just going to pull out a couple. This one's by Tom Hickey. There is no operational necessity to issue bonds at all. They do not finance deficits, nor do taxes fund deficits. The government simply issues currency. Bonds are essentially obsolete after the end of the gold standard and irrelevant operationally under the present system, and there is no operational necessity for issuing them. Underneath that is one from Andrew P. The Congress imposes legislative restraints solely, that's on itself, solely to maintain its own authority. That's a bit hard to understand unless you've understood the 91 comments that went before it. Without the power of the purse, the Congress would be irrelevant, and the President would be an absolute dictator. Again, it's hard to understand unless you've read the article and all the comments, and even so, you probably won't get out of this world and start understanding the MMT world. And this is the primary reason that the Fed is set up as an independent government-owned corporation, and why there is a federal debt limit. There is no monetary necessity for the formal constraints of the Treasury having to borrow money from the Fed or the markets, but there is a balance of powers necessity. Complicated, but it's a whole new world since governments went off the gold standard onto a new full fiat system. And I think there are no people in the world that understand it fully. The MMTers, I think, are the first ones to be putting their brains into the place of understanding. It's a whole new world. It's like coming out of the Newtonian real world and going into the Einsteinian economic world. Anyway, moving on to Steve Keen down in Australia, and deleveraging, deceleration and the double dip. I'll give you the first 3 paragraphs. Much optimism flowed from last week's declaration by the National Bureau of Economic Research that the US recession officially ended in June 2009. How nice of them to let us know. Markets reacted warmly, and the 8% rally in US stocks through September seems more important than the revelation that the US Fed is worried enough about deflation to be planning another round of quantitative easing, dubbed QE2. I wish I could share the markets and the NBER's irrational exuberance, but the key indicator that explains where the economy and its already disastrous employment situation is headed implies that even QE2 won't set the US on a course to renewed prosperity. Now, this is a world where the two worlds intertwangle. The real world that we understand and the monetary world that nobody understands. But this Keane article is genius. It's wonderful. And it says why, exactly why things have been like they are, why they are like they are, and how they will be in the future, to the best of his ability, and boy does he have ability. Basically, he uses some wonderful analogies in there, which are easy to follow, with charts to follow them as well. But I'll just do you an easy one. That we started here at the top of the hill where the food was, and we went for a walk down the hill because it was a nice day and we had a nice time. But now we're getting hungry and we've got to go back up to the top of the hill. And that's what we've started doing. That's the debt we've taken on, going down the hill, and it was all a nice day. But we're hungry at the end of the day and we've got to go and eat back at the top of the hill. So we've started on our way back up, kind of deleveraging debt, paying it back. And we've stopped, and we've got a bit bored with that at the moment, and then we've skipped down the hill a bit more because we remember the exhilaration of going down the hill and how nice it was. But the hunger is still biting, and we've got to get back to the top of the hill. My version of his analogy, which was driving a car from New York to Los Angeles, or Los Angeles to New York, a wonderful to read article, and I believe that the facts that he's got together of the amalgamation of these two things will be how it is. The Guardian co-UK, government borrowing hits record high. This is the UK. Last month's figure of £16.2 billion was the worse than expected and the highest September deficit on record. The UK government is doing their spending budget thing yesterday and will want to cut this. But as I said the day before, they're cutting it, but it'll still be driving upwards. The deficit will still be opening. They'll still be spending wildly more than they take in taxes. And the MMT question is, does it damn well matter? Last one, Ian Dale's diary, who's some mad conservative follower. The return of sound money question mark. Earlier this morning I was walking over Lambeth Bridge when I ran into a senior figure in the government. "It's going to be a good Conservative day," he remarked. "Indeed," I agreed. Not because the CSR, that's the working out the budget thing, is going to inflict policies on the country which inevitably lead to job cuts for other people. No one would want to do that in any normal economic circumstances to the poor people. But because it means that after a very long time, the British government will be returning to policies based on sound money. Short-term individual pain coming will lead to a long-term economic gain. No, that's French. It did in 1981, and it will now. There is no way of soft-soaping that message, and I firmly believe it is one the British public understands. It worked in 1981, so it'll work now. I would not bet on it. The Pragmatic Capitalist article and those 100 comments are well worth reading if you want to know about money. Basically, it comes right down to if you're betting on anything, like even if you're buying precious metals, because quantitative easing will make inflation rates go up and drive down the value of the dollar and the pound and the euro and this and that and the other. You haven't a clue what you're talking about. What will ultimately is that the economy, the energy of the economy is going to be drained away with the buy-ness on fossil fuels. But there's nobody that understands this money side, not the central bankers, certainly not the politicians. There are very few bloggers that I think have even started getting a handle on the Einsteinian economy that we now have with fiat money in the government circles. You and I most certainly do not understand it. And if we're going to be making big bets on it, I think we're being very foolish without trying to understand it. And I would bet, even if we try and understand it, we're not going to. It's just too damn complicated. But one thing we can say for sure, it is not the old real world gold standard environment and these damn good conservative chaps that are going to cut down on government spending are going to drive the UK into the ground, just like Greece and Ireland and Eastern European countries, and anybody that goes for austerity at this time is going to just ruin their countries. Hey, bye.